morning. It is Monday, the 19th of January. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis live here on Euronews. Coming up today, European lawmakers say they will not be blackmailed as they respond to President Donald Trump's threats of tariffs against countries voicing support for Greenland. As the US president signals a tougher economic stance towards allies, concern is growing here in Brussels of a looming trade war. An emergency EU summit has been scheduled for Thursday. For more on what President Trump is planning and what exactly it could mean for Europe's economy, we can now head to the Swiss village of Davos, to the World Economic Forum, where our EU editor, Maria Tadeo, is standing by for us. Good morning, Maria. Just tell us, what exactly is President Trump threatening and what could it mean for our viewers?
Well, good morning, May, from this Davos special, of course, the World Economic Forum kicking off this weekend. A dramatic weekend, as you say. President Trump saying he would slap 10% tariffs on 8 European countries, including Germany, France, and Denmark, for playing, quote, dangerous games around Greenland and the Arctic. That tariff could go all the way to 25% by June if the complete and total sale, that's a quote, of Greenland is not sealed by then. Obviously, that has triggered a furious and very fast reaction from the Europeans, saying they cannot agree to this blackmail. As you say, yesterday there was a summit of European ambassadors, an extraordinary meeting, and they held talks for almost 3 hours. We understand, and a diplomat familiar with the matter told Euronews that multiple discussions were held, multiple tools were presented in terms of what could this response look like. At this point, we should stress, however, the EU has decided not to deploy the anti-coercion tool. Remember, that is a trade bazooka to some extent that could really shut off access to American companies to the single market. They have, however, revived a list of potential retaliatory tariffs of 93 billion euros that could be done if there is no deal before that February 1st deadline for the tariffs that President Trump is threatening to go into effect. But they still say there is a diplomatic way out, and there's still, of course, the way of dialogue, and that is always what the EU prefers. Of course, we should note that for the Europeans, it is clear that if no solution is found before the end of the month, well, obviously the EU and the US will be heading into a trade war. That scenario, I repeat, is one that Brussels wants to avoid at this hour.
Well, you mentioned dialogue, Maria, and of course EU leaders are hoping to encounter President Trump there in Davos, in the corridors of the World Economic Forum. What should we expect from those meetings?
Well, it's a lot of shuttle diplomacy. That's how a diplomat told me last night. They look at the meetings in Davos. Of course, the head of the European Commission will be participating, but also a number of European leaders and President Trump. This will be the first opportunity to meet face to face ever since, of course, that threat came in on the Saturday for tariffs if Greenland is not sold to the United States. Obviously, Denmark refuses that and has said that it will not move an inch on that point. But of course, the meetings this week in Davos could provide that path for diplomacy, but also a ramp up to tensions. We should also note a meeting of European leaders is expected in Brussels on Thursday.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Maria Tadeo, for that live update there from Davos. And to get, of course, the view from the European Parliament, we can bring in the Italian MEP now, Brando Benefei, who also heads the European Parliament's delegation for relations with the United States. Good morning, Mr. Benefei. Thank you so much for joining us here live on Europe Today.
Thank you. Good morning.
So look, if President Trump does follow through with his threats, we're looking at a full-blown trade war. What will that mean for Europeans?
Well, we are brought in this direction by the escalation that was built by President Trump. We do not want to be here. We have been always clear. We value the transatlantic relationship. We want good relations with the United States. But what is happening in these days is crossing another red line. In fact, it's threatening a NATO country. Greenland is part of Denmark. And so I think a very important thing is that whatever deterrence measures we propose, which can be further tariffs in case Trump goes on with his intent, or the anti-coercion instrument that will damage US economy. The important thing is that we are clear what are the conditions for this to be activated. My experience working on the relations with the US is that we are not credible if we just say we are ready to use measures, but we do not clearly, calmly say what are the conditions for that to be triggered. And in my view, we should set a clear deadline. If in a few weeks we do not have clarity and an agreement on the future of Greenland, I think we need to be clear that the measures will be activated.
Because now, of course, the EU is choosing diplomacy over these punitive tools. Why is now not the moment to use these tough trade measures, Mr. Benifei?
Well, I think that any tentative to still have a diplomatic solution must be used until the very end. But there must be an end. The problem of Europe is that this end of the tentative to find a diplomatic solution sometimes seems to never end. And this is profited by, in this case, the US, who think we are not credible. We are not serious about the possible consequences. So I think we need to be clear that there would be very bad consequences for the US economy if Trump administration goes in that direction. And I know because of my work that many in the Congress are on our same side. I hope and I wish that many more voices in the US Congress will raise to say that this madness has to end and that we need to sit down and work together as allies.
And indeed, we've seen, of course, volatility this morning on the financial markets. Our viewers back home exactly concerned as well, worried about the impact this could have on them. But many, of course, calling as well for the EU-US trade deal to be frozen, to be put on hold. That could be a strong move the Europeans could play here.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable because as extra tariffs are being threatened, the agreement in this moment seems to be not fulfilled from the US side. There should never be such a threat of further tariffs because of the presence of military from a certain state in Greenland. But this is what we heard from President Trump. So inevitably, the vote that was foreseen next week in the Trade Committee of the European Parliament to actually advance the deal will be frozen. I'm sure this will be the result. I hope that we will be able to resume this work soon and that the relations go back to normal. But this is not the situation today, and I think we need to be very serious.
Indeed, Brando Benifei, thank you so much for joining us this morning here live on Euronews. MEPs, of course, will discuss this crisis situation in Greenland and the impact of this major trade dispute at their plenary session taking place this week in Strasbourg. Our Jakob Janis explains how we got here and why it matters to you.
Greenland is not for sale, but that will not stop the most famous real estate investor. And to get it, Trump is literally ready to put the transatlantic alliance on ice. And here is the big picture. Starting this February, Trump will hit 8 European countries that openly oppose his Greenland takeover with a 10% tariff. His demand? Sell the island or pay up. However, the US is EU's biggest business partner. Trade in goods and services hits a staggering 1.6 trillion euros a year. And unlike the deficit with China, this relationship is healthy. Trade is balanced with a gap of just 3%. But trade wars are no joke. US exports to Europe support over 2 million American workers, while European investment in the US employs over 3.5 million. And for us, it's even bigger. Exports to the US support 5 million European jobs, and US companies here employ another 4.5 million. Now that freezes over. In response, the leader of the biggest European Parliament party, Manfred Weber, says the EU-US trade pact is not possible at this stage. And Brussels is stuck. It still has the anti-coercion instrument, a trade bazooka ready to hit back, but some are hesitating to pull the trigger. Meanwhile, last Saturday, the EU rushed to sign the Mercosur deal to replace the unreliable US market with Latin American partners. Big politics is usually distant, but this time it's about your job and your wallet, so buckle up. And this week, EU leaders are meeting Trump in Davos. Let's hope they bring winter coats, as they will get a frosty reception.
And for more on how this tariff dispute could overshadow the World Economic Forum taking place in the snowy village of Davos, we can head back there now and bring in Maria Tadeo once more, who's joined, in fact, by the managing director of the whole forum. Maria?
Yes, of course, and we'll be live this entire week from Davos, and I'm very happy to say we're joined by Mary Dusek, who is a managing editor, as you say, but also director, and chief business officer at the World Economic Forum. Sir, thank you very much. You say a forum like this provides a platform for dialogue, but the world is in disarray. We saw that over the weekend. Is dialogue really an option?
No, we are convening leaders from around the world at a very pivotal time for global geopolitics. It is a very contested geopolitical and geoeconomic environment. So a platform like this is actually needed more than ever for people to come together, engage, and have that dialogue, given the velocity of change geopolitically and geoeconomically that we're seeing happening all around us.
And of course, as we said at the top of the show, there will be important meetings between European leaders and President Trump. Just out of curiosity, and I'm sure our viewers really care about this, President Trump is not an easy guest to book. How does that happen? And what do you think it matters for the U.S. to be here?
No, it's very important. We have President Trump here, the representative of the largest economy in the world, together with 64 other heads of state and government from around the world, including Commission President von der Leyen. We have Chancellor Merz, President Macron. So it's going to be a big diplomatic moment here, I think, this week, given a lot of the changes that we're seeing, particularly on the trade front.
And can I ask you, now that you mentioned the trade, and that's becoming now incredibly important, in a way, trade and tariffs are becoming a way of doing politics. How different is the agenda for the World Economic Forum this year? There's been, of course, a lot of this talk that it will focus less on climate, perhaps less on progressive ideas. Some suggest it's a less woke Davos. Is that too much, perhaps, speculation on that? What's the focus this year for you?
No, the program overall is developed with looking at what is the latest data on the state of the world economy. Of course, we have a number of long-standing work streams that we also put on the agenda that have a critical milestone. So, for example, we have a big pillar focusing here on building prosperity within planetary boundaries. We have a big pillar on investing better in people. But, of course, also issues related to technology, the AI revolution, and geopolitics are also a big part of the agenda.
So the social component still matters, or would you say this is a more business-minded, business-focused Davos?
No, for example, the pillar on investing in people is really all about how do you prepare people for the new economy that is emerging. So there is a number of sessions that are really having a very clear-eyed view of what it means for communities and people around the world.
And sir, there's two final questions I want to ask you. There's been a lot of speculation that Iran's foreign minister will be participating this week. Can you confirm that? And again, is that in the spirit of dialogue? Because a week ago it looked like it was going to be a war.
The Iranian foreign minister was invited some time ago, and we don't have right now a session with him in the program.
And just lastly, by the time we get to Friday, what's a good Davos? Just very briefly, what does a good Davos look like?
Given the stakes that we now see in particularly economic diplomacy, we will have a lot of those protagonists here that I mentioned, so that we hope that we can play a role in facilitating engagement and dialogue on a very important issue for Europe and for all stakeholders.
Well, sir, thank you very much. And of course, the World Economic Forum continues this entire week. Will be live, a platform for dialogue. We'll have to wait and see.
Indeed, Maria Tadeo, thank you so much for that. And of course to Mira Dusek, the Managing Director of the World Economic Forum. And for more on what's going on in Davos, do follow our special coverage on Euronews, including a daily evening show. And of course, for updates on the tragic train crash that took place in Spain last night, do visit our website, euronews.com, or download our app. That's it for today. See you tomorrow.